This is Frank Sawyer with Hollywood Sports, and this is our Olympic men's hockey betting guide. I love betting international events like this. I started doing it a few years ago with World Cup Soccer and continued it with the 2012 Summer Olympics with men's and women's basketball, men's and women's soccer, and have had real good success with it. I don't think we've had a losing campaign in any of these events yet. The books are just looking to break even and make their money off of the VIG, and that does lead to some very nice situations and some soft betting lines as we're really betting against the public. And so certainly my veteran handicapping skills helps in assessing situations that I'm familiar with, but it also comes down to good old hard work researching these teams and getting information about these teams, and thanks to the World Wide Web, that information is out there. So with that in mind, here are 4 things that I'm considering on a macro level when it comes to assessing these 2014 Olympic men's hockey events. First is the format. 12 teams are competing in these events, and they're separated into 3 groups of 4. They will play a round-robin schedule, and from those results, that will determine the seedings for the subsequent knockout stage. Now, every team will qualify for the knockout stage. The top 4 teams overall will receive a bye into the quarterfinals. But that does create an interesting situation in that some of these elite teams may not be as concerned about these opening group stage events because they want to build, they want to learn some things about their team. They know that their money games are the ones in the knockout round, and so sometimes the motivational levels or who they play in net may be different than what they would do in the knockout stage. All games will go into overtime if there is a tie after regulation. The first session of overtime is a 5-minute 4-on-4 session, just like they play in the NHL. That time will extend in the knockout stages, by the way. If the game is still tied after the 4-on-4 session, then they go to a shootout. And if this is an interesting component, if after the first shootout it's still a tie, they'll go to a second shootout, but the coach then has the option of using the same player more than once in those shootouts. This happened in 2010 with Canada, who in that second shootout decided to use Sidney Crosby over and over and over again, and he ended up winning the game for them. Number 2, let's look at times and lines. Because these games are being played in Russia, we have some morning times we have to deal with. Games will generally be played at 4:30 a.m. Eastern, 7:30 a.m. Eastern, and then noon, so we need to adjust for that schedule. And because the books are looking to often make their lines based off the previous day's results, that can lead to some pretty tight times where we get lines are available to us before the start time, and so we got to keep that in mind. I'm offering this report on Friday afternoon, and I remember last night I didn't get the lines for Friday's games until very late in the evening last night, and so that can be frustrating. But as always, patience has to be a virtue in this situation. Number 3 is assessing the impact of the big ice. European game is played on rinks that are 15 feet wider than NHL rinks, and that then will facilitate a style of play that is faster and much more open to take advantage of the skating skills of the elite players in the game. The grinding style of play that's often successful in the Stanley Cup playoffs does not work on these bigger rinks. Canada learned that the hard way in 2006 when they assembled a team of grinders and they didn't take advantage of some of the speed players that they have, and they ended up being humiliated with a 7th-place result in those Olympics. Both Canada and the United States then played for the gold medal in 2010, but remember, that was in the Vancouver Canucks hockey rink, which is, of course, an NHL arena. And so this is the first time that these Olympic Games will be played for Canada and the United States. This is our first opportunity to learn from the mistakes of 2006 and compose a roster that can better take advantage of the bigger ice that is going to be in the Russian arena. And it is to be seen whether they were successful doing that. Not only am I considering that, but the other thing, because of these bigger rinks, I'm more likely to consider taking overs, just because the style of play that the Stanley Cup teams like to play, where it's grinded out in defense and physical and hitting, and there's no fighting in these games, that facilitates scoring. And so I'm going to be more likely in situations to lean towards the over. but not necessarily always, because these lines that have been higher. We've seen lines that have been in the 6s and 7s, so the books are aware of that situation as well. Number 4, the last thing I'm considering is not to underestimate underdogs. You know, it can be real easy to evaluate these teams by where's all the NHL talent divided up, and then here's the best teams and so forth. But unfortunately, that is exactly how Joe Q Public is going to assess these games as well. So we need to be a bit savvier than that. And we need to remember that Canada's team flopped in 2006, though they had a bunch of NHL talent. A Russian team in 2010 with players like Ovechkin and Malkin and Kovalchuk and Datsuk, loaded. They finished 6 overall in Vancouver. So just NHL players by itself does not determine who's going to win these games. You know, and the team that has won the most medals since the NHL players started playing the Olympics is Finland. And while Finland has its share of NHL players, it's dominated by players coming from the European leagues. So let's remember that team cohesion plays a big part in these games. The players from Europe are familiar with these rinks more so, and so I'm not necessarily going to underestimate teams that only have a handful or not that many NHLers when it's compared to those other teams. And these underdogs have consistently paid off in these games, and that's something I'm going to be keeping in mind as I try to beat Joe Public and make money in these 2014 Olympics. I'll be active betting this tournament the entire way, and there's money to be had here. So get on board, and best of luck for us.